If you never watched Phil Taylor throw a dart, you missed the most dominant force the sport has ever seen.
For a 9-dart finish! We've seen it from Taylor!
16 world titles, over 200 tournament wins, a decade of complete control over every player who dared stand across from him. So if you're new to darts, or too young to remember his prime, this is the video you watch to understand what made Phil Taylor the power. Not just the greatest darts player of all time, a sporting icon who left behind trophies, fear, and just a hint of controversy. Phil Taylor's journey didn't start with fireworks. No magazine covers, no sponsorships, no arenas packed with roaring fans. It started in Stoke-on-Trent, a working-class town in England where the factories ran hot and darts was something you played down the pub with a pint in one hand. Taylor worked in a ceramics factory. Hard graft, long shifts, the kind of job where your hands got covered in dust and your dreams stayed small. He didn't come from money, didn't have the swagger of a prodigy. He was just normal. But that's what made what came next so ridiculous. Because somewhere in that pub, somewhere in that quiet routine, he started to find something, a rhythm, a talent, a calmness that most players never find, even with decades of practice. And that's when he met Eric Bristow. Bristow wasn't just a 5-time world champion, he was darts, charismatic, cocky, and cutthroat. But he saw something in Taylor, something raw. He didn't just offer advice, he gave Taylor £10,000 out of his own pocket to go pro. No contracts, no strings, just belief. Most people would have cracked under that kind of pressure. Taylor didn't. He trained like a machine, practiced until his arm felt like it would fall off. And in 1990, just 2 years later, he repaid Bristow in the most brutal way imaginable. He faced him in the World Championship final, the mentor versus the student, and Taylor annihilated him 6-1.
Is missed the story of the match.
4 requires 49.
Will it be 17 or 9? We'll see. Double top, yes, for the title. Double 10. It's there! It's there! He jumps up, he shakes hands with Bristow. Bristow the champion in the 80s.
That wasn't a win, that was a message. He didn't just beat the man who taught him everything, he showed him how much he'd outgrown him. That final wasn't even close, and suddenly, the darts world had to confront a terrifying reality. This guy wasn't just a future star, he was already better than everyone else. But here's the part most people miss. Taylor didn't walk off that stage thinking, I've made it. He walked off thinking, what's next? Because that was the thing about Phil Taylor. He wasn't chasing headlines, he was chasing perfection. Winning once wasn't enough. He wanted to dominate, to bury his opponents so deep they couldn't even pretend it was close. He wasn't interested in rivalries, he was interested in erasing them. And within just 2 years of that first title, he wouldn't just change his own life, he'd help change the sport forever. After that first title, Phil Taylor didn't slow down. He stepped on the gas and didn't lift his foot for nearly 2 decades. What followed wasn't a winning streak, it was a full-blown takeover of the sport as everyone knew it. Because from the early 90s to the late 2010s, Taylor didn't just win more than anyone else. He made legends look like they didn't belong on the same stage. 16 world titles, 14 in the PDC, over 200 professional tournament wins. He was rewriting the record book so fast people couldn't keep up with the numbers. And it wasn't streaky, it wasn't one hot year followed by a slump. Taylor was the calendar, year after year, season after season, trophy after trophy. He erased the concept of competition. Some players had rivalries, Taylor had victims. John Part, Peter Manley, Dennis Priestley, Raymond van Barneveld, all elite players in their own right, all steamrolled at one point or another by the power. Because Taylor didn't play games, he played patterns. Rinse, repeat, humiliate. His averages were from another planet. He was hitting 100+ averages for entire tournaments. At the 2010 World Match Play, he averaged 106.3. That shouldn't even be real.
Philip Taylor can still statistically break the world record for a final. Double 12 to break the record. He does! 109.75! He's broke the world!
Most pros spend their entire careers chasing a 100 average. Taylor made 105 look routine, and in that match, he destroyed Raymond van Barneveld, another world champion, who averaged over 100 himself and still looked outclassed. But it wasn't just the numbers, it was the fear. Players walked on stage already 2 legs down in their minds. You could see it, the body language, the hesitation, the slow collapse. Taylor would open with a 180 and suddenly the air felt heavy. You'd see it, the quick glance at the scoreboard, the forced smile, the silent panic setting in. Because even if you played your best game, it still might not be enough. And that broke people. It's one thing to lose, it's another to realise, mid-match, that you never had a chance. The 2002 World Championship final, Taylor versus Peter Manley. Manley was no pushover, confident, charismatic, a real threat. But Taylor swept him, 7-0, a world final, and Manley couldn't get on the board. By the end, Manley wasn't angry, he was just relieved it was over. And that might be the most Phil Taylor thing ever, making a finalist grateful for defeat. Taylor didn't just dominate the sport, he became the sport. He made darts bigger than it had ever been. He took it out of smoky pubs and into sold-out arenas, into the mainstream, into households, into history. This wasn't a peak, it was an era. And for the rest of the field, it was a very long, very painful one. For all his brilliance, and there was a mountain of it, Taylor's career wasn't spotless. The most talked about controversy, a moment that didn't involve missing a target, but missing the truth. It was the Gibraltar Trophy 2013. Taylor was closing out a match and stepped up needing double 12. He threw, he missed, clear as day, but the referee called it in. Game over, Taylor wins. Even though the dart was visibly outside the wire, he didn't correct it, didn't protest, he just walked away with the victory. No cheating, no foul play. But for a man who didn't need help to win, it stuck.
As good as a mile. Particularly when Phil Taylor is sat there on a potential 2-dot, although that is a nasty miss. He's still got to find himself a treble, which he has done. And Phil Taylor now looking at double 12.
And the flag, Phil Taylor. The flag, Phil.
It didn't look in at first, did it?
Really didn't, I have to say. I thought Russ had called that wrong, but
Fans split down the middle. Some said it was the ref's call, end of story. Others believed the true champion would have stopped the match right there. And it wasn't the only moment where his reputation took a hit. Back in 1999, Taylor was convicted of indecent assault after 2 female fans accused him of groping them in a caravan during an exhibition event in Scotland. He denied the charges, but was found guilty and fined £2,000. The Professional Darts Corporation stripped him of his MBE, a royal honour he'd been awarded just 2 years earlier. For a lot of fans, that moment is uncomfortable to reconcile with the greatness on stage, because the player they saw week in, week out, the dominant machine, suddenly had a very human, very serious flaw attached to his name. It didn't end his career, it didn't even slow it down, but it added a permanent asterisk for some. That's the truth of legacy. It's never clean. Even when you're the greatest to ever throw a dart, the shadows still follow you to the oche. No reign lasts forever. Not even one built on 16 world titles and 2 decades of fear. By the early 2010s, the game had changed. New faces, new energy, higher averages, faster rhythms, and for the first time in years, players weren't afraid of Phil Taylor. They were targeting him. The whispers started slow, that he was slipping, that the aura was fading, that the machine wasn't so perfect anymore. And then came Michael van Gerwen, not just a hotshot, not just a contender, a phenom, a player who, like Taylor, didn't just win, he crushed. He wasn't scared, he wasn't cautious, he stared Taylor down like an equal and beat him. By 2014, the crown had shifted. Van Gerwen was world number 1.
That is unbelievable. That's exactly what he needed. Now, treble 19 for the bullseye. What an amazing finish! What an amazing finish!
Taylor was no longer the unbeatable final boss. He was a legend, but one that the new generation wanted to surpass, not avoid. And yet, Taylor didn't disappear. He kept showing up, kept making finals, kept reminding people, you haven't seen the last of me yet. His decline wasn't a collapse, it was a slow, stubborn resistance. And in 2018, at the PDC World Championship, he gave the sport one last chapter, one final run, one more shot at the title. It wasn't supposed to happen. He was 57, slower, less sharp, but match after match, he kept winning. Old fans roared, new fans watched in disbelief. The legend was still alive. He made the final, one more night, one more shot at 17, but standing across from him was Rob Cross, a newcomer, a wild card, someone who wasn't even on tour the year before. And that night, the story ended. Cross played fearless, took his chances, and denied Taylor the fairy tale. It wasn't a loss, it was a handoff. A final reminder that even kings must leave the throne. Taylor didn't cry, didn't beg for applause. He just said he was done and walked off, quietly, like a man who knew he'd already said everything he needed to say, and in truth, he had. Phil Taylor didn't just set the standard, he was the standard. 16 world titles, over 200 professional wins, and a mental stranglehold on the game that spanned 3 decades. He wasn't the most flashy. He didn't care about viral walk-ons or throwing tantrums on stage. He cared about winning, over and over again, until everyone else gave up trying. But his story isn't just dominance, it's discipline, evolution, and yes, controversy, the missed double, the conviction, the moments that put a blemish on a legacy that otherwise looked untouchable. And that's what makes him real. Because greatness isn't always clean. Sometimes it's raw, complicated, uncomfortable. And that's what Phil Taylor gave darts, a legacy you can't look away from. He didn't just win trophies, he built the sport you see today. He took darts out of smoky pubs and onto primetime television. And now, every player who steps on stage plays in his shadow. So if you never saw him in his prime, this is what you missed. A one-man empire, a destroyer of dreams, a legend who made perfection feel routine until it wasn't. But if you thought this story had twists, wait until you see what happens when players stop chasing trophies and start chasing shortcuts. Because in our next video, we're diving into the dark side of the game, the darts players who cheated, the ones who got caught, and the ones who nearly got away with it. Click here to see the biggest cheating scandals in darts history, some you won't believe actually happened.